Start off with a roll call.
And just for the record, this is the Planning and Zoning Board for October 4th, 2023.
Mark Hum,
Here.
Juan Cotton, Zaid Shamsi Bashan,
Here.
Dan Waleski,
Here.
Evelyn Arcudio. Here. Dave Matthews,
Here.
Hank Paulsky.
Here.
You have Mark.
Thank you. We'll stand out for the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any additions or deletions? Okay. We have the minutes for September 6th, 2023.
I move to approve the minutes in the September meeting.
Thank you. We have a second.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nay? Passes unanimously. Okay, we've got the swearing in of staff and applicants.
Please stand and raise your right hand if you plan on giving testimony.
Ma'am.
Are you the advocate? Okay. Do you swear and affirm the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
And staff confirm the publication review variance. We saw in fact here. So nothing to send any board disclosures.
I know Carolyn, I've known her for a long time. I don't know anything about this. This is the first time we've seen her in a couple weeks or a month or so.
And you believe you can be objective, and you believe you can hear this case objective.
I think I think I can be upset.
Okay. So I think we're moving right into the new business.
Yes. Good evening. For the record, I'm Abraham Fogel, Senior Community Planner for the Community Sustainability Department, and I will be presenting this item. So our item tonight is PZB project number 23-015-00011, and it is consideration of a variance to allow a 6-foot high fence in the required setback for the property located at 1701 12th Avenue North. Here we have a location map of the property. It's located on the corner of North A Street and 12th Avenue North, and the property is located within the single-family residential zoning district. Bit of background, I'll just touch on a few of these items. The home was originally constructed in the 1950s. Flash forward to the 1990s, that's when the original fence permit was issued on that side street yard. And at the end of 2022 in December, there was a code compliance case initiated. Part of the violations, rather, I should say, involved repairing, removing, or replacing the existing fence that was in disrepair. Following that, a fence permit was submitted. It could not be approved by staff because the required setback and landscape screen were not being provided. Subsequent to that, the code case was closed since the fence permit was submitted, although not approved. And after that, we worked with the applicant to get a complete application in, since the applicant indicated they wanted to pursue a variance for the fence height at that location. So again, the variance before you is to allow 62 linear feet of a 6-foot high fence along the side property line, which is adjacent to a roadway, being North A Street, without the 30-inch setback and without the required landscape screen. Here we have the survey highlighted in orange. You can see that portion of the fence that the variance is associated with. Moving on to the zoning analysis, we need to go through the criteria for granting a variance. Number 1 pertains to special circumstances or conditions. which are particular to the land or building for which the variance is sought and do not generally apply to nearby lands and buildings and is not the result of any action of the applicant. So as the analysis was provided in the staff report, homes on corner lots are a common condition in the city. The applicant does contend that the location of the trees would conflict with the location of the fence if it were to be set back 30 inches. In communicating with the applicant, we did indicate there is an option to request an administrative adjustment. And that's a process that's reviewed by staff and approved by our community sustainability director, which is our development review official. And one of those adjustments is to deem that the lot has double frontage. And what that would allow is to install your fence on the property line, but you would need to reduce the height to 4 feet, which is what is allowed in front yards in our code. And we also indicated that, if additional privacy needed to be achieved, hedging could be installed, maybe not right behind the fence, but dispersed in that side yard. So concluding that thought, since corner lots are common and relief was offered through this administrative adjustment process, staff does not find that this criterion is met. Number 2, strict application of the provision of these LDRs would deprive the applicant of any reasonable use of the land or building for which the variance is sought. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, this property was developed in the 1950s with a single family home. Strict interpretation of the fencing code would not deprive reasonable use of the land. And as I mentioned, there was the administrative adjustment process, which would yield some relief by allowing the fence to be located on the property line, albeit at a lower height. Number 3, the variance proposed is the minimum variance, which makes possible the reasonable use of the land or building. Again, as I mentioned, through a reduced height and a different location in the landscape screen, we find that those issues could be addressed. So this is also not the minimum relief needed. Moving on to our last one. Number 4, the granting of the variance will be in accordance with the spirit and purpose of this chapter and will not be unduly injurious to contiguous property or the surrounding neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to the public welfare. So about 10 years ago is when essentially the land development code as we know it today was adopted through ordinance 2013-34. That new code language included these fence regulations. And essentially the setback and the landscape screen help create a visual buffer between the fencing and the sidewalk to create an enhanced community appearance and streetscape. And this was very intentional in the writing of the code. We also find this type of code language in other municipalities. So granting of this variance would be contrary to the intent of the code as it was written. So we also find that this criterion is not met. So in conclusion, as the circumstances of the lot are typical for a corner lot and relief was offered through the administrative adjustment process, a hardship was not established. Further, substantial and competent evidence was not provided by the applicant to demonstrate that they would be deprived of reasonable use of the land if the LDRs are enforced. Therefore, staff is recommending that the Planning and Zoning Board not approve the proposed variance based on the data and analysis in the staff report. That concludes my presentation, and the applicant is with us tonight.
Okay, let's hear from the applicants, and then we'll get any public comments and then we'll discussion. Would you please stand up and introduce yourself, please?
Good evening. I'm sorry to make you all work late, but this is extremely important to us, and it's tearing at our hearts that we have to go through this. I'd like to read my variance criteria. One of them at the bottom to start with, it kind of hits the nail on the head. With the granting of the variance, nothing changes to the above noted property. All surrounding neighborhood is not detrimental to public safety or welfare. We bought this house for my son when he started a family about 15 years ago. I live up East Street, by the way, 126, Carolyn Dealey, sorry, got that. I know people start to forget. Anyway. When we chose it in part because we like the vegetation around it. It has trees along the fence. I go down what's been offered, sorry. Hard day today, my car broke down in the middle of 10th Avenue. That's crazy. 6 foot fence right now is what was there when we moved in. Over the years, my son has helped fix the fence, like, for example, when we had hurricanes and the panel blew down, he would put it back up again. It started to rot in places, so he would put in a panel. He's been doing this for 2, 3, 4 years, just a panel here, a panel there, in the same position that was there before. It hasn't changed at all. When we got to about 2/3, maybe 3/4 done, we heard from the city. We thought they meant that, well, you know, it looks kind of weird, part of it done, part of it not done. So we flourished. We've only done part of the time because we don't have any money. My husband and I are retired and nobody's got any money to do the whole fence. We didn't get a permit because we didn't do the whole fence at one time. But we did do the last section because of the code, which I don't know how many slats we put in at the or whatever they call those sections at the last fittings, but we did do more than one. We probably did about 5. I'm not positive about it. So when it was done, we found out that it wasn't that we had done it, it was that we didn't like where we had done it, and we have just done it where it was before. So the offer of 6 feet, 3 feet back would mean we'd have to rip down those beautiful trees, which was part of the reason we bought the property in the first place. I mean, those of you who know me know I'm extremely vegetation aware. And just to tear up these beautiful trees, there's I think 5 of them there, they've been there since the property was built. They're gorgeous. So we don't want to tear up the trees. Putting a 4-foot instead, if you look at the property line, I don't know what I can show us around. But if you see a 4-foot down here would have great view going all the way over to the house. One problem with that is that this is all windows back here. And second problem with that is that if you've ever driven down A Street, especially at rush hour, there's kids walking by from school, there's people driving by in cars. There's going to be absolutely no privacy at all. Also, the option was given to put a hedge, but to put a hedge where the trees are, well, I don't mean we'd have to move the trees. I don't know how you would put a hedge where there are trees. If these trees are established, they have roots, they have trunks. It's not like they're little thin skinny trees. So putting in a hedge would be out of the question. See what else. Sorry, it's been a horrible weekday month here. 4 feet, yes. Anyway, the last thing was that there was talk about it being detrimental to public safety and welfare. And that's the side of the house, the front of the house is on 12th Avenue. This, I tried to send this picture, but it just didn't want to go. The A Street goes down here. This is me waiting for my kids. I take the grandkids to school every day and pick them up, so I know what it's like to drive around there. I do it 2, 3, 4 times a day. One goes to middle school, one goes to high school. So this is my route. And there's no traffic problems except for when there's a lot of traffic, you just have to wait your turn. But other than waiting your turn, which to me is nothing to do with a fence, I don't know what the problem is. It was there when we bought it. We love the trees. We love the height. We see no reason. It's a nice looking, the fence you see there is the one that my son completed. It's finished, it's there. it's gonna tear him up if he has to rip it down and put something else in. So hopefully you understand my concern and different thoughts to the people out here.
I just want to correct staff's position. We didn't require the trees. One of the recommendations was to put the fence behind the trees. And then to leave the trees as part of the continuous landscape screen. So that would have brought it in compliance. So they didn't have to, there was never a requirement to remove the trees and install a hedge. It's just a continuous landscape screen is required, and that can be a mix of landscape materials, including trees, if somebody would like that to do that.
Are there any public comments? No. Okay. I have a couple of things to clarify real quick. So timeline wise in the fence was permitted, no use fee center was permitted, and that was permitted in application back before the code changed. So in 1991, it was permitted, it was in the application. And that fence has been there continuously from that point until today, right? Or was there a point when the fence was?
So we can only go off of our records. I don't know if in between then.
Well, I think you're asking about the non-conformity section of our code. Which we're-
I'm not, first, I'm just trying, we went through a detailed timeline.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand the timeline.
So, right, per our records, kind of what I have in the property file is in the 90s, kind of on that side, there was a fence. Fast forward to today, but whether or not something changed in that period, I wouldn't know.
In
Oh,
2000,
I want to make sure that it's clear that this is not the same fence that was permitted and installed in the 90s. This is new fence. It's replacement fence. That changes the analysis. So I just want to make sure that that's.
Well, it sounds like, so when the code compliance case was brought in 2022. That code compliance case was spoken against it because of disrepair on the fence, and that case was closed. And it was closed without a permit being issued. Do you know why that code compliance case was closed?
I wouldn't be able to answer on their process. But I can say there was the violation for that, and while they closed, the permit was in process, but as far as the procedure for closing or opening a code case, I wouldn't know.
They may have closed it because the applicant applied for it. Maybe that was incorrectly done, or maybe there was, when was it? It was in 2022, so it would have been post. Yeah, we just can't speak to that.
At that time, are there photographs from the code compliance case, what the fence looked like in 2022?
So the code case doesn't come into staff's analysis because we have a section regarding nonconformities. And once you replace a structure or anything beyond 51%, that new structure, whether it's a fence or a driveway or whatever, once you dig it up, if it's a driveway completely, or you take down the fence, then you come in, when you replace your fence, the new fence code comes into apply. And that's where I was kind of getting. So what happened or didn't happen with the code case, the reality is you can see it's a new fence. So as a new fence, it has to meet the new code because the new fence was installed subsequent to the 2013 code change.
I can understand if the entire fence was replaced. I don't know, and I understand the 50% threshold. And I think what we heard from the applicant was that the reason they had a code compliance issue was that they had replaced pieces of it. And then the last section of it was 5 or 6 panels of it, which I'm not sure if that constitutes 50%.
So you're also not supposed to replace 2 panels every year. There's a maximum limit in the building code to the most you can do before it goes back to review. So if you replace 2 panels every year with the intent to completely replace your thing to circumvent the requirement of restoring a fence, there's a trigger. So if you apply for a permit for the 2 panels at a time, then those panels are kind of recorded. And then there's like, hey, they've applied for 2 panels every 6 months. They're obviously their intent is to replace the full fence, right? So then we would say, okay, well, you're really replacing the fence here. Hey, we need to talk about this. So the permits were not applied for by the 2 panels. They were just that's 2 panels. Those are or they weren't that. There was no permits. It was just done over time. And okay, that's fine. I mean, look, this kind of thing happens. You know, we have a homeowner, they didn't know, they were just doing what was best and they were trying to take care of things as their budget allowed. It happens.
But just put into perspective on our day to day, we could, because we do deal with that a lot. By the time a permit is required, it's because they're replacing enough of the fence that they've gotten that direction from building. And this is a common situation. We find some older fences from before that code, and we routinely have this conversation and explain now it has to come, be set back, have the landscape screen. So for us, it's something we've applied and seen over and over again.
Yeah, once you do more than two, even if you do two, you can't just keep doing two at a time and replace your whole fence. The idea is you can do up to 2 panels and then you really need to be coming in for a permit to do the whole fence.
Over a period of time, I mean, if you have a fence and a panel breaks, you fix that panel. 2 years from now, a different panel breaks, you replace it. Like you're allowed to repair up to a certain amount of fence. without-
Yeah, I mean, I think though that this was done
That's-
clearly with the intent to replace the fence, right? It was doing as they could afford to replace the fence because the fence had exceeded its useful life. So that's where we're coming from. If you guys want to come to a different conclusion, but our staff report was based on that this is functionally a new fence, more than 51% of the fence was replaced. There was a permit that came in because there was more than 2 sections of the fence being replaced at a time, and that permit was denied. So that's where we are for staff.
The only thing that I wish that I had more information on is the fact that this all seems to have been triggered from a code compliance, an existing fence to disrepair. And that code compliance was then satisfied and closed. And that we're now addressing this after the code compliance. So I feel like there's a missing piece in terms of what was discussed with the applicant in terms of resolving the code compliance, and I know myself, I have dealings with the city that there's no paperwork on from when I moved to the city and in the past, I would hate for that to come back up. And I'm saying, well, I had this agreement. And I talked to the guy and he said, we're okay. So I guess this question would be to the applicant. Do you have any records? Do you remember this code compliance when the code compliance came up? Did you own the property from 2008, right?
Yes.
So you would have been served with a code compliance issue in 2022, about 2 years ago. Hopefully it says in December of 2022, so not even 2 years ago.
Not a year ago.
Less than a year ago, there would have been a code compliance case brought against you.
That's when we first started thinking about finishing. Thanks. Yeah, that's when we first started thinking about completing the fence. We hadn't thought about building the whole fence before. It wasn't something we initially thought of. Just when we got the code compliance, we thought they were telling us we hadn't done a good enough job on what was left of some of the planks are still rotten and on the old side, so we filled in the end part then. Also, can I say one thing about moving it behind the trees? The trees have about a 4 or 5 foot width. We'd lose 4 or 5 feet of it'd be right up to the side of the house. You'd take about 5 feet off the side of the house.
I have a quick question for the applicant. I have a question for the staff afterwards. Okay, just what percentage of the fence do you think that you've repaired?
Now,
Yeah,
it's complete now because when they did the code violation, we thought they were telling us we hadn't done the whole thing, so we finished the whole thing.
so you replaced 100% of the fence, is that what you're saying?
Now, yes, that's what you got pictures of, I think. We got pictures. They took pictures.
Okay,
It's
thank you.
finished.
My question for the staff. Just not questioning, but asking a little bit about the administrative adjustment, allowing the fence or not allowing it. I'm a little unfamiliar with that. Can you kind of give me why, what is involved to go through that type of administrative adjustment and why we couldn't use it in this case?
Oh, it was offered. So in our code for certain aspects that you need relief, one of them includes fencing. You can apply it administratively for staff, and it's a determination and it's approved by our community sustainability director, which in our code is our development review official. So for our single family and two family zone properties, between the house and the street, essentially your front yard, in that area, the maximum fence height that you can have is 4 feet. So in this instance, the applicant could apply to request that her side street yard where this fence is located at would also be considered front yard, so a double frontage lot, so that she could install the fence at 4 feet high at the property line. So that's the option we indicated. To do that, maintain the trees in place. Perhaps the shrubs don't go directly behind it, but maybe, you know, around. And I mean, there's so many different ways to create landscape screen and planting.
So that requires, it's sort of like a permit type of thing where they have to file,
It's like an administrative.
administrative type of.
It's kind of like an administrative, almost variance, but it's for a very specific purpose. And part of that is because on a lot of our corner lots, we have houses that are oriented sometimes towards the front of the lot, which is the legal front of the lot, is our legal frontage in our code. So the narrowest point of the lot is always the front yard. And so sometimes we have buildings that are oriented in different ways or different things. So we allow this particular relief because the fence was already constructed and there might have been a way to cut it down or do something to reuse it. We thought it's not something we would normally offer, but we thought it was a reasonable solution in this case, while not ideal for anybody. You know, it was kind of a meeting in the middle. So so that's kind of where we came to thought on that.
And even with that, in dealing with other corner properties, we always discuss that option because our code does have that option. You can imagine just the classic corner house with the white picket fence that goes around at 4 feet tall. Some people like that appearance. So that's what that would facilitate.
So the administrative adjustment could vary according to the project that we're talking about, right?
Not for that, because that you're just considering, please, for fencing purposes, consider that my front yard as well. So I will keep it at 4
It's
feet.
really mainly for fencing, just because of the orient, because, you know, it's weird to, like, especially if you have a house that's facing a side lot, it's weird to allow a 6-foot fence in front of there, or we don't allow 6 foot in front of houses, and then not, you know, and then allow, but then where their side yard actually is, you know, so there, basically it allows the DRO to establish frontage. So the most we could offer her was double frontage because her house actually faces the front.
Right.
So we can't say this is this is really the front of her house when her house is facing that way. So we offered the double frontage.
I appreciate that. Thank you for clarification on that.
Anyone else have any questions?
I have one. So if you were to repair or replace this fence, I guess the two options is you replace with a 4-foot fence, or you could cut this existing fence to 4 feet.
Yeah, if they wanted to, they could cut the fence. So I mean, it's just a wood fence. They could probably easily make that, you know, it wouldn't cost them that much more money if, you know, to cut. Now they would still need a permit. Now we could issue the permit for the 4-foot fence because they've replaced enough of it. They have a permit in process still, or is it expired?
It's in process, it's disapproved. They would just change the documentation to say it's going to be 4, and then when the inspector goes out, he'll check that it's at that height.
And that's in the future right now, right?
No. So right now they have a disapproved permit.
Yeah, and actually, if that was a solution that you were interested in, you could grant the variance for the 4-foot fence, so the applicant didn't have to go through the administrative adjustment after going through the variance. You know, you could just reduce the fence here tonight to the 4 feet in the side yard.
Two more things. One's just in general, I'm aware that there's other cases like this around the city. There's one that I can think of in particular that I walk by all the time. That's a fence that's a pre-existing fence that's right on a side street that would fall under this. And I can tell that they've been, you know, I believe it's even painted, so they've kind of maintained that. And I know it's interesting to me, and I guess if there's any kind of clarification, a lot of times if you have a building structure, it's possible with good repair and good housekeeping to maintain a structure for 200 years. It's really not with wood fence. The wood fences are gonna deteriorate, and so the whole idea of kind of being kind of a pre-existing approval on something seems like it just doesn't apply to a fence the way that wood structures. Is that kind of correct in your?
So I think it's important to think about the code is constructed to always bring you into conformance. So when you think of it in that framework, the fence regulations change. And there's also the regulations that tell you once something deteriorates, you're losing that vesting. So it is constructed. You have the situation because the code is working. The fence deteriorated. So once you replace it, you're going to meet the current requirement.
You can prevent a house from deteriorating, it's a lot harder to prevent a fence from deteriorating. So at some point, that's gonna deteriorate, because if you maintain a home, you can have historic homes that are old and well maintained that are perfectly fine, but so that answers that question. The second is, so this, in terms of approving the variance for this, I don't see, I understand that it doesn't make sense to approve the variance. However, I still feel like there's a very cloudy area around the code components, and correct me if I'm wrong with this, but so if the applicant had not submitted for a permit at all, this code compliance space was closed, eventually would have been reopened, or a new code compliance space would have been opened, saying that they built a permit without, or built a fence without permit. Right, that would have been the next step.
Yeah.
It would have been a new code.
Yes.
Right, if like this variance is not approved and it stays and there's not a remedy, that can be a new case because that fence is up without an approved permit.
And sometimes they'll do that. I know it's not common, but sometimes they'll close out a case if they know it's moving forward. And the applicant's asking good work, moving forward in good faith. Clearly, this applicant was. So, but then if it doesn't work out in the end, then to your point, then a code case gets added later for work without permit if it's not resolved eventually.
So I guess from, in the reservation that I have is if the applicant was claiming that we did exactly what we were told to do, and this was the issue, and we were told to do it, and we did it, and it closed the case, but then they came out and told us we have to open this permit, that could be resolved in front of a magistrate or a compliance issue. That wouldn't be resolved either way. If that was the case, that still would not be resolved by our board, because that's not our role.
The only resolution to this fence right now is whether or not to grant this variance or to have the fence come into compliance, either through lowering the height or moving the fence. So the code case, even though it was closed, if another one was to be opened for work without permits or replacing the fence without a permit, the fence is still not going to get a permit in its current location, in its current state at the current height. It would have to come back to you for this variance or lower the height through a variance with the administrative approval process, or relocate the fence in accordance with the current code. So you end up back here. If you deny this, and the new code case starts up, that it's a circle. So there was no reason to keep the code case open when they were working through this process already that would potentially occur in violation. This is the way to the cure.
The building permit is the way to the cure. So to get the building permit in its current condition, they need the variance, or they need to modify the building permit to get the 4 feet.
So if there's no other questions, the chair can't make a motion.
So bring me up to speed again, if we go with the motion of,
I think the motions are back.
right?
No.
Where we can bring it up.
Yes,
Oh, here it is, okay.
they are.
Yeah, they are backwards. Thank you. Sorry.
I mean, I can just say I don't personally feel ready to make a motion. I mean, I think this is a tough call. I'm looking and searching for guidance. I'm reading the required findings of approval for the variance. In my mind, the administrative solution that staff is offering really reduces the applicability of a lot of these factors. Meaning what I'm saying is that I think that staff's sort of, you can move the fence and it can be 6 feet, or it can be 4 feet in its present location. I mean, I think that choice really undercuts the applicant's any argument that there's a serious need or she's deprived of reasonable value of the land. I mean, I think that's in simple terms, I think it's a fair compromise. And I think she has a choice that she can make.
So if you think that the fence in the current location with a variance to allow the height at 4 feet is a variance that you could approve, you can motion for that variance instead.
It would be like Elizabeth and I were just saying, like the justification would be that would be the same relief that they would be getting through the administrative process. So that's that, it basically that solution would be offered. Would, whether they select it or not, if you do vote to approve that, then they have the choice to go and think about it and decide what they want to do later. It doesn't mean that they have to do it that way. You know what I mean? It just puts the end of the approval process, or if you don't feel comfortable doing that and you want staff to do it administratively, we're happy to take her through that process. It is another fee, but I don't think it's very much. What is it? Is it like, it's like, I can't remember. I think it's 250. So that's why we thought, because I know she's on a budget. If you are comfortable with that solution, if you wanted to offer that today, then she doesn't have to pay another fee. And she would have that option.
I mean, are we all? I personally, I wish I could grant that free because it is this and all that, but unfortunately there is close compliance that we have to follow. So personally, I wish I could. Officially, I think that 40, on the property line,
I agree with that as well. I think that there is, again, I think I struggle a bit because I know that there's so many different non-conforming issues in the city. And I think that we do that 50%, like if you have a non-conforming driveway and your driveway cracks in the city, it's even code enforcement. And that you have to fix your driveway. Does that mean you actually have to eliminate your driveway because is that the way that we're interpreting this now?
So it depends. I mean, we can get
Sometimes.
it sometimes, like it.
That's what I have an issue
Yeah.
with, is there sometimes.
So it just depends on the individual circumstances of that particular driveway. How much of that driveway has cracked? How much of the driveway are you replacing? Are you digging it for pavers? Are you digging up the entire substrate? If it's an asphalt one, you can resurface asphalt. But once you dig up the core asphalt and redo your entire asphalt driveway, you dug up your whole driveway. So if you have to dig up your entire driveway because it's cracked, then, to Abe's point, the point of the code is to bring conformance. And so at that point, then you would need to replace your driveway.
But there is some, vested, like, if you were to repair that driveway, if it didn't break, code is not saying your driveway is bad. Your driveway is pre-existing or non-conforming.
Yeah, code doesn't make that decisions. They just tell you if your driveway is really damaged and you need to fix it. And then they come in for a permit and then we work through that. We try to be reasonable and work with people and be common sense and practical. Like if it's a section of driveway they're digging up, but when people come up and dig up their entire driveway,
Right.
you got to replace your driveway in accordance to the code,
And the thing is just hard to, when when these issues come up with code enforcement and things like you said, well, what are they gonna do? Are they gonna remove the substrate? Are they gonna do that? But the more that a homeowner is educated, aware of those, to know what they can do to maintain the existing condition or have to repair it is important. And somehow during this code enforcement, in the enforcement of this code violation, the homeowner thought they were doing something right and were not, and now it's jeopardized their ability to, because now they have removed the fence. Now, I don't know what condition, you don't have photos, we have no idea what condition the fence was
We
in.
can pull up.
Maybe
I don't
it
know
could
if I
have
can
been,
get on the-
but it wasn't. Maybe it could have been. it, but it
Oh,
wasn't.
I'm just,
And so that's what I have to struggle with. But again, that 100%, I don't think is our place as a board to resolve that. There's a whole separate way that code enforcement is resolved. It's just, yeah, I feel for that situation, but I don't think that it warrants a variance from us, and I do think before, but I think if we're not going to do the variance, which I'm agreeing that we should, I do think we should approve the 4-foot height so that it's an option, because I don't believe that she should have to come back and pay more money for the administrative process.
Excuse me, is it by going with the 4-foot height? Is that a decision that this board is making tonight that we're making?
So you have to include it in your motion, because otherwise we're gonna charge her for an administrative, because we can't waive fees that we're not legally allowed to. So, by doing the 4 feet, it would, we can help you with that condition, so that if she doesn't choose to construct it at 4 feet, then that variance doesn't run with the land forever. So it would be that the variance would be, maybe Elizabeth could help with the language. So if the fence isn't constructed at 4 feet, you would have to come back for an administrative adjustment later. So you're not granting something that she's not going to utilize. And then that runs with, because variances, the reason why variances are so hard, they're forever, okay? They're longer than getting married. They're longer than death. They're like, they're forever. So we can do something like that. So there's an end if the applicant chooses.
Well, I just want to make sure because there's nothing, with all the analysts and all the staff reports and everything else, nothing was mentioned prior till tonight till now. Correct about the 4 foot.
No, the analysis was in the staff report for the 4
The
feet.
staff, okay, but I am an agreeable, I do not think there should be a variance according to what's happening, but I do agree that we could go with the 4-foot fence.
And I think Elizabeth and I were talking about the justification for the variance for the 4-foot fence is that this is a remedy that's available through the administrative process. And that,
So the reason it wasn't set out as one of the motions in your staff report is
Right.
because it's not what the applicant is requesting.
Okay.
The analysis of that this was offered to the applicant previously, because it's a separate administrative process, it was made available to them. They said, no, thank you. They wanted to come here and present their actual request to you.
That's why I was questioning that.
Yeah,
Well,
so
that's
what's-
why I was saying it was
What
not
staff
part
is
of that.
saying, right, so what staff is saying is, we put in here our analysis that
Yeah.
that is an option that could have been offered, so if you wanted to say that you can approve that as the applicable variance, because it meets the criteria, because it would be allowed under the administrative process, and that grants some relief without having to go through the separate application process.
Would you repeat that? No, I understand.
Okay, then do we have anyone really want to lunch?
So is it a matter of disapproving the variance, but then say, how would we word it?
So you want to, right, so it'd be moving to approve the variance. Approve a variance to allow the 4-foot high fence in the existing location. And that it meets the variance criteria and go through 1 through 4 of the variance criteria and show how it meets that criteria for the 4-foot.
I'm gonna wing it.
Yeah, wing it, and we'll help you with the details if needed.
Yeah, okay, so I move to approve the PZB product number 23-01500011 with staff recommending conditions for variance to allow 4-foot high fence in the existing location meeting the criteria 1 through 4. Right, fencing along Northeast Street without the required setback within 15 feet of the property at 1701 12th Avenue North. The application meets the variance criteria.
Nope, that meets the criteria. Now set that out. How?
Meets the criteria.
Say number one, so it's,
number one.
yeah.
Oh, okay, so I have to read them.
Yeah.
Number one, special circumstances or conditions exist which are peculiar to the land or building village environments and thought and do not apply generally to nearby lands and buildings. It's not the result of action. And two, I had to read.
So you have to say why. Yeah, so maybe what we were saying is, maybe what you could consider is that this is equivalent to
A double frontage
a
lot.
double frontage lot, and that
Or-
relief is available through the administrative process.
Okay, so through the administrative process, there could be a relief of the,
And this could be considered a double frontage lot.
okay, so this could be considered a double frontage lot.
All right.
Keep going, number two.
Number two.
Okay, the strict application of the provision of these LDRs would deprive the applicant of any reasonable use of the land or building for which the area is installed.
So, yeah, again, with the administrative process, that this,
That this type of relief is permitted.
This type of relief could be permitted through the administrative process.
We're stretching here, folks.
The variance-
I mean, I hate to charge this lady this money, so.
Yeah. The variance proposed is the minimum variance between cost and reasonable use of one building. Could be.
Just do the minute.
yeah,
administrative.
as a double frontage lot, that this,
Lot.
The 4-foot height
the
is the
4-foot
typical.
height is the typical height for a front yard. And the setback and landscaping would not be required.
Which is 4-foot, administrative,
That's okay, we got you, and that's the minimum.
Yeah.
To grant that is the minimum variance that would grant the relief.
The granting of the variance will be in accordance with the spirit of this chapter and will not be unduly injuring to contiguous property with surrounding and by the lines. Through the administrative.
Adjustment. So that type of relief was thought to exist or as a needed tool within the code, something like that.
Okay, so we have a satisfactory motion. Look at over there. All right.
So do you guys want this to run with the land, or do you want to say if a building permit is not issued within a year? That the variance, so do you want to add to your motion that the variance will basically expire? The variance will expire, right?
In a year, if a building permit is not been approved for the 4-foot fence.
Yeah, no, so the variance has a timeline of a year.
That's what we're asking, if that's
Right.
what you all would like to.
What's phrasing?
So just read the phrasing.
Yeah, so it, that the variance would expire in a year. If a building permit has not been approved for the 4-foot fence in the current location.
Okay, so the variance will expire in 1 year if the building permit has not been approved for the formal fence.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Quick question. Before we-
Yes.
When we're dealing with difficult motions like that, and staff puts together very good articulate language and says that, is it appropriate or allowable for one of us to say, I would like to amend my motion with the phrasing that staff just said?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's. I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt you. I didn't want to interrupt you, but you definitely do that. You can also just, you get so moved if someone said something.
I'm gonna tell you after the meeting, so. So it just takes experience this is hard work, what you guys are doing.
Staff articulates it really well. You can just say, I moved to include that language. You know, as
Okay,
long as it's
thank
read in the
you.
record. Okay, so I think that was the only item on our agenda. We already saw there was no public comments. Any planning issues, department reports? Anything else, your board member comments? This is, I have one comment, which is about 2 meetings ago, we approved, I believe it was the hate the name of it, but the something Heights, the ALF, or sorry, Independent Senior Living,
Oh, that's.
Madison Terrace. I want to congratulate them. They got the best lottery number of Palm Beach County. So when you apply for funding, you get a lottery number, and then when those get selected, whoever gets the lowest lottery number, and they actually got the lowest. So as long as their application was all good, they will most likely get funding and see that project actually. Get built. So
You have those numbers? I'd like to play them tonight.
Yeah. They got lucky for sure. They got real lucky. That's hard to do.
my project got the first lottery number, so I'm aware that they got a good one. But yeah, so congratulations to them. That's all I'm saying.